Annie sat on the small porch of their little apartment, her knees pulled close to her chest. She had just finished wiping down the chessboard her mother found at a garage sale 2 years ago. Some pieces were chipped and one pawn was just a pebble painted white, but Annie didn't mind. To her, every piece had magic in it. She had learned to see the whole board in her mind, even with her eyes closed. Inside the house, her mother, Lila, was getting ready for work. She wore her usual black and white uniform, the one with the little ruffles at the sleeves. Lila cleaned big fancy houses for rich people in Beverly Hills. Today, she had to work extra hours because her boss, Mrs. Veronica Halden, was throwing a big party. Annie, her mother called softly, "I may be late tonight. Mrs. Halden needs help preparing for the fundraiser. Please eat your dinner and go to bed early." Annie nodded. She never complained. She understood what her mother did for them, every mop, every dish, every folded napkin. That was how they survived. Later that afternoon, Lila entered the grand white mansion that towered like a castle over the hills. Veronica Halden was already in the living room, barking orders at other staff. "Lila," she said with a smirk, "I hope you've taught your daughter some manners. She'll be joining us tonight." Lila blinked. "Excuse me." Veronica flipped her long blonde hair over one shoulder and smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "It's just a bit of fun. My guests are bringing their children for some games and music. I thought we'd have a chess table and, well, wouldn't it be hilarious if your daughter played against me? The crowd could use some entertainment." Lila's heart dropped. She knew that tone. It wasn't kindness. It was a joke. A cruel one. But she couldn't say no. Not without risking her job. Back home, Annie looked up as her mother walked through the door with a strange look on her face. "Annie," she said slowly, "Mrs. Halden invited you to the party tomorrow. She wants you to play chess with her." Annie blinked. "With her?" Lila sat beside her. "You don't have to go. I'll find a way to. I'll go," Annie said quietly, her voice calm. "It's okay, Mama." Lila stared at her daughter. Annie's face showed no fear. "Just focus." The next evening, Annie stood in front of the Halden mansion wearing her best dress. It was plain white cotton with small blue flowers. Her mother had ironed it with care. The house was full of shiny lights and strangers with big voices. Children in sparkly clothes ran through the hallways, while grown-ups sipped drinks and laughed loudly. Veronica spotted them and walked over with a grin that didn't reach her eyes. "There she is. The little champion," she said loudly enough for her guests to hear. "Come now, darling. Don't be shy." Annie stepped forward, her eyes on the floor. They reached the chess table set near the grand fireplace. A golden clock ticked behind it. Guests gathered, smiling, expecting something silly, like a rich woman showing off how clever she was by beating a poor girl. Veronica sat down and cracked her knuckles. "Are you ready, sweetheart? I'll go easy on you." Annie nodded and sat across from her. Her fingers gently touched the black queen on her side. The guests sipped their drinks and chuckled. The game began. Veronica opened with a fancy move, puffing her chest out. Annie didn't react. She moved her knight quietly. Lila stood near the kitchen doorway, frozen with fear. She had seen her daughter play before, but never like this. Veronica talked a lot during the first few moves. "Oh no, darling. That's not how you're supposed to. Oh wait, maybe you're just guessing." More laughter from the crowd. But then, Annie's moves began to change. They were quiet, sharp. She was watching the whole board, moving with purpose. Veronica made another loud move, knocking Annie's pawn off the board. "Oops," she said. "Sorry." Annie said nothing, but her eyes gleamed. One guest whispered, "Wait, that's the Ruy Lopez opening, isn't it?" Another guest frowned. "How does she know that?" Veronica paused. Her next move was a little slower. Annie didn't even blink before replying. Her fingers were steady, her eyes locked on the center. 5 moves later, Veronica's smile had vanished. By now, the room had gone quiet. Veronica leaned in. "Who taught you this game?" she hissed. "Myself," Annie whispered. "And books. And practice." Her voice was soft but steady, like a river that never stops flowing. The board was changing. Veronica's king had fewer places to run. Annie had built a perfect trap and nobody had noticed until now. Gasps echoed from behind them. Someone started filming with a phone. Annie didn't even blink. She was seeing every possible move in her head 10, 20 steps ahead. Like lightning. Like music. Veronica's hands started to shake. Lila gripped her apron, breath held tight. The golden clock behind the table ticked louder. Veronica tried a bold move, hoping to scare the girl. But Annie blocked it with ease. The trap was almost complete. Someone whispered, "She's going to win." Veronica's face turned red, but Annie just sat quietly like she belonged there all along. The room felt tight, even though it was huge. People leaned in closer, their drinks forgotten. All eyes were locked on the little girl with calm eyes and the proud woman now sweating in her expensive dress. Veronica Halden shifted in her chair. Her fingers hovered over the board, unsure where to go. The pieces were no longer in her control. Her guests, her rich, powerful friends, watched in silence, waiting to see what would happen next. Annie didn't smile. She didn't taunt. She just moved her bishop and whispered, "Check." A few people gasped. Veronica blinked. "What?" "I said check," Annie repeated softly, pointing at the board. Veronica stared at the black queen that was now guarding her king like a shadow. She moved her rook in a rush, knocking it slightly sideways. Annie reached for her knight and placed it gently near the center. People started whispering. "Who is this girl? She's a maid's daughter, isn't she? How is she doing this?" Annie didn't hear any of them. She was deep inside her own world. She wasn't thinking about the gold carpet or the glass chandeliers or the people laughing. She was thinking about moves she had practiced alone in the quiet of the night when her mother worked double shifts and she couldn't sleep. She remembered the way she used to draw boards on notebook paper because they couldn't afford a real one. She remembered copying chess puzzles from old books at the library using a pencil so she wouldn't get caught. She remembered playing against herself over and over because there was no one else to play with. Annie had played 10,000 games in her mind. And this one against Veronica Halden was not the hardest. Veronica tried again. She slammed a pawn forward and looked up, hoping the guests would clap. But no one did. They were staring at Annie. Annie moved her queen with grace. It slid across the board like a dancer. Another check. Veronica's jaw tightened. "Beginner's luck," she muttered. "She must have memorized a few tricks." "She's not just lucky," someone said from the crowd. "She's brilliant." Veronica's hand trembled. She looked around the room. This is a party, not a competition," she said with a shaky laugh. "She's just a kid. Let's not take this too seriously." Annie looked up at her. "I am taking it seriously." The crowd froze. Her voice was calm, but it sliced through the air like a knife. Veronica opened her mouth, then closed it again. She moved her king, barely escaping another trap. Annie leaned forward, her eyes shining like moonlight. She played her next move. Her knight hopped into a perfect position. The crowd gasped again. Veronica's king was surrounded. Her face turned pale. Flashbulbs popped. Someone had started filming. Another whispered into their phone. Even the other kids had stopped playing and were now crowded around the table, watching this quiet girl defeat someone rich and powerful without saying a single mean word. In the back, Lila covered her mouth with both hands. Her eyes were filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. She had always known her daughter was smart, but seeing the whole room bow to her talent, it made her chest feel full and warm, like sunlight after a storm. Veronica made a last wild move. She knocked Annie's knight off the board and smiled in triumph, but it was empty. Annie simply responded with one soft move. Her queen slid into place. "Checkmate," Annie whispered. The room went silent. Not one sound, not even a cough. Then, slowly, the sound of clapping began. One guest clapped, then another, and another. Soon the room filled with applause. Not fake, not polite, real, powerful applause. Veronica sat frozen, her face white with shock. Her king lay trapped. She had lost. Annie stood up quietly. She didn't bow. She didn't smile wide. She just turned to face the crowd, her face calm, her chin high. Someone in the crowd said, "She's a genius." Another whispered, "Who is she?" "Her name is Annie," Lila said proudly, stepping forward for the first time. Annie walked over to her mother and took her hand. Lila squeezed it tightly. Veronica was still sitting, not saying a word. People began gathering around Annie. A man in glasses gave her his card and said, "I run a chess academy. I'd like to sponsor you." A woman offered to buy her a brand new board and books. Another said, "Would you like a scholarship?" Annie just nodded quietly, her heart beating fast now that it was all over. From the corner, a child whispered to his dad, "I want to be like her." Veronica slowly stood up, her pride shattered. She tried to speak, but no one was listening anymore. They were all focused on Annie. The girl who was supposed to be the joke had become the star. That night, as Annie and her mother walked home under the streetlights, Lila looked down at her daughter and said, "I've never been so proud." Annie smiled. "I just played the game." "But you changed everything," her mother whispered, and she had. By the next morning, Annie's chess match was all over the internet. Videos taken by guests at the party had gone viral. People shared clips of the quiet black girl beating a powerful millionaire in her own home. Some wrote about how calm and brilliant she was. Others shared how Veronica had tried to mock her and how that plan had backfired in front of everyone. News stations picked it up. Young chess prodigy shocks Beverly Hills party flashed across TV screens. Journalists started calling the Halden mansion. Veronica didn't answer. She had locked herself in her bedroom, too embarrassed to speak to anyone. But Annie? Annie was still the same. She helped her mom clean their little kitchen. She folded laundry. She read from her chess notebook. She didn't need the spotlight. All she needed was the board and the game. Still, the world didn't stop noticing her. The same man who gave her a card at the party came by the apartment. His name was Mr. Jacobs and he owned a famous chess school. "I've trained kids from all over," he said, smiling kindly. "But I've never seen someone play like you, Annie. Would you like a full scholarship to our academy?" Annie blinked. "Free. Everything. Books, travel, tutors. You've earned it." Lila's hands shook as she took the paper. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you so much." Later that week, Annie was invited to play on a real stage, under bright lights, against other young champions. Her hands were nervous at first, but once the game started, the calm returned. She beat them all. People started calling her the Silent Storm. She barely spoke during matches, but her moves were sharp and full of fire. Even grandmasters wanted to meet her. Lila was offered a job managing events for one of the biggest hotels in the city. No more cleaning toilets. No more being called names or looked down on. People finally saw her as more than just a maid. She was the mother of a genius. Meanwhile, Veronica Halden tried to go back to normal life. But things had changed. Her guests no longer laughed at her jokes the same way. Her fancy friends started inviting other people to host fundraisers. People whispered behind her back, "Did you see how she treated that girl? She only invited her to humiliate her." It was cruel. No one forgot. The video of her loss had over 10 million views. One afternoon, Veronica saw Annie's face on a billboard. It read, "Brains over bullies, Annie's chess camp, free for all kids." Veronica's chest tightened. Annie had taken the prize money she'd won from tournaments and started her own chess program for low-income kids. Every Saturday, she taught chess for free in a community center near her home. Dozens of kids showed up with curious eyes and eager hands. Annie smiled more now, especially when she saw other kids learn their first checkmate. She would walk from one table to the next, saying kind things, fixing pieces, explaining moves. One little girl raised her hand. "Miss Annie, how did you get so smart?" Annie laughed gently. "I practiced, and I didn't give up." That evening, after camp, Annie and her mom walked home under the soft orange sky. The streets were quiet, and the trees swayed gently in the breeze. Lila looked at her daughter and said, "You know, you've done more than just win games." Annie tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "You gave people hope. You made them believe that it doesn't matter where you come from or how much money you have. What matters is what's in your heart and in your mind." Annie thought about it, then smiled. "Mama." "Yes, baby? Can I teach chess at school too? I want more kids to play." Lila nodded. "We'll talk to your teacher." And they did. Soon, Annie had started chess clubs in 3 local schools. She gave out boards, taught kids after class, and even got help from volunteer coaches. One of the schools named the club after her, the Annie League. Even kids who had never played before joined, smiling and laughing as they learned. One day, a boy came up to her and said, "My big brother says you're famous." Annie grinned. "Maybe, but I just really like chess." That night, she sat by her window, the stars blinking quietly above. She opened her old notebook and wrote, "Even when no one sees you, keep learning. Keep dreaming. The world will catch up one day." In another part of the city, Veronica Halden scrolled past another article about Annie's chess camp. She sighed and closed her laptop. She would never forget that night. Not because she lost a game, but because she had lost to a child she never believed in. And that child had become a queen.